I got this really interesting question from an artist who had reached out to me for help with this question on color theory. It's something that he had been wrestling with for a year and a half. And he had reached out to other artists and teachers, and everyone was stumped. It had me stumped as well. But we figured it out together, and I want to share it with you all. Super interesting. So let's imagine that you just finished your line drawing and you start putting in your local colors. Let's imagine this guy has a bronze flesh tone, but you want to have a cool lighting scenario where the light is casting a slightly blue hue. Now this all looks more blue, but the light doesn't feel cool. This light is warm compared to the shadows. But if I can add warmth to my shadows, now we have the impression of cool light. So you're ready to start working in your midtones, and you grab your main color, and if you know anything about midtones, you know that they tend to get more colorful as they get closer to the shadow. So we'll take this, we'll maybe even add a little bit more red because we've got subsurface scattering on his skin. We want to capture some of the blood underneath his skin. And as we start to put this down, we realize that we're now actually changing the color temperature relationship again. The lights are beginning to feel more warm and the shadows are getting cool, which is now creating an impression of a warm lighting environment, not a cool lighting environment. Even if I knock this down, there's still a major inconsistency. This is a warm shadow with a cool light, but this now reads as a warm light against a cool shadow, which is fracturing the impression of the painting. And that's the question that the artist came to me with. How do you paint a warm object in a cool environment or a cool object in a warm environment, particularly the midtones? And at first I thought this might be straightforward. I've painted cool objects in warm environments before. If I asked you to find this color in my painting, you might start looking over here, maybe over here, but it's actually the color blue. This is the color blue in my painting. But the actual answer to the question is really complex when you try to put it into words. We want to create a principle out of this that we can apply to any painting, especially when we're working without a reference. So let's start with the principles that we know. First, your light shades should be brighter than your shadow shades, and your light should also be more colorful, meaning that the shadow should be relatively gray or desaturated. Additionally, you'll also find the most color in the midtones. And finally, we come to temperature. If we have a light source that is warm, then the areas the light is not touching, aka shadow, will be relatively cool. And if we have a light source that is cool, then the shadows will be relatively warm. Now, aside from the overall relationship between light and shadow, the temperature of the light source is most visible in the midtone. To solve this problem, I decided to really take this to the extremes in very ambient, strong temperature environments. And I was able to make this look orange and this look blue. And actually, these colors are really similar to each other. This is even more red than this one. And what you can learn from this is just how desaturated both of these colors are. This is less colorful than the shadow. And this actually makes sense when you think about this in the context of the light. If you have a warm light shining on a blue object, it's just not going to be able to pick up the rich blues from that sphere. And now if the light is desaturated, wouldn't it also make sense that the midtones would not be quite so saturated either? Obviously, if I took this rich blue and started to put it into here, this would really throw off the impression of light, as would this warmer orange. And actually it looks like I could get a little bit more pink into here to help this look more orange. You can see it's actually just a slightly brighter version of the same gray. Let me first soften these edges because I know that values and edges matter more than color. Just eliminate one more variable. And look, this is already working. This is already belonging in that space. I don't feel like it needs much of a change in this midtone here. Maybe this one could get a little bit more, not blue, but I think orange. This one, maybe we could add a little bit more purple in here. This grayer tone in here actually seems to be quite nice. So let me take some of this purple and gently go over the midtone with this and see what happens. And look at that. We've added some color and it actually helps make this feel more orange and this feel more orange with this cool midtone going in between it. Now this is still not very colorful. It's still a gray. Let's try over here. Let's take a red and just gently going over this. Let's take an orange here, put it in on this light blue sphere, and that seems to be helping. Now I've taken colors from the surrounding environment and put it in, which I think is a factor here. But if we just look at these colors by themselves, they are incredibly gray. So this light is the same as this, and this is the midtone of that. And the additional red of this midtone is helping this feel more blue. The shadow here is more saturated than both the midtone and the light, and I think that has more to do with the fact that the ambience of this environment has such a strong color. So this is a puzzle of prioritization. Which principles matter more and when? And in this case with this strong ambience, I'm finding that the temperature of the light is having more of an effect on the colors of the objects than the local colors of the objects themselves. And then when I add even more temperature shifts in here, even a little bit of yellow in there, it really starts to pop. Honestly, my brain is fried as I've tried to explain this in the best way I can, but there's really these juggling factors. So let me give you a process that will help you establish parameters and move forward so you can just get to creating art. So first you want to establish the overall lighting environment, and this can happen in several ways. First, you could choose an overall color you want to go with. For this, I want to do a nighttime scene. You can think about the temperature of the light. So this is a cool light against a warmer shadow. And then also, how much do you want the light to affect the local colors of the environment, which I'm going to let be influenced a lot. And then for each object, you can mix a basic light and a basic shadow. And start by figuring out what white would be. What would white look like in this environment? That can really give you a lot of structure to help you find what the other colors will need to be. Even better if you can find black as well. And you can see how rather than just blindly mixing colors, I'm actually starting by establishing an overall impression of warm shadows in this cool environment. If you want a more ambient painting, then the lights and shadows will be more similar to each other, or maybe just the shadows will be really close to each other. There's really a lot of wiggle room here. But either way, you should be able to create an impression of an object's color in this stage alone without worrying about midtones or anything like that. It's kind of hard to describe this, but everything will be setting a parameter for you. Something in your painting is going to be the most red color. What would that be? Establish that, figure that out. In my case, it's going to be the flesh tones. Just increasing the warmth in my shadows to make sure that they're still cool. And it kind of happened by accident, but this is already working as a midtone. It's taking the colors from the environment and mixing in with my tan red colors. You can see how it fits really neatly in here. And as I soften this down, you see that there's a nice play in temperature between these different colors. So I'm going to reinforce that in these midtones in my painting, the areas where the light and shadow meet. I especially want to put it in my form shadows, and it's just so nice to see how well it connects to the environment while also making all these colors come more alive. Now let's add in some highlights, and if this is white, it might be that it's something kind of like this, but probably more of a neutral version. I'm not entirely sure, honestly. At a certain point, I think it's easier to just take a trial by error rather than try to create a perfect formula for every scenario. And I think that really says a lot. It's just gain experience painting the light and shadow, and these answers will come more naturally to you, problems that are unique to each painting that you're creating. I feel like this painting could just go off in so many different directions from here because I have this structure intact. It's really cool that once you can paint a cool object in a warm environment or a warm object in a cool environment, you really get to accentuate the light so much more powerfully. So I hope this was helpful to you all and give you some inspiration for whatever art you're creating. And I'm still doing critiques, so if you want to get some insight on your work specifically, then just go to the link in the description, send me your work, and I'll share my thoughts. All right, everyone, have a beautiful day.